Texas A&M's four-game winning streak came to an end on Saturday night with a 29-19 loss to Ole Miss, effectively ending their chances at reaching the SEC title game as well in the process. Honestly, the way the game played out had a lot of similarities to the way they began conference play. We'll get into all that, but Ole Miss comes away with a 29-19 win to improve to 8-2 SEC play. Credit to them; they really controlled the game from start to finish. Lane Kiffin and the Rebels had A&M's defense on their heels in the first half, and it was a similar story to earlier in the year for the A&M offense. Just couldn't get going early, and frankly, it could have been worse than it was at halftime. But A&M was able to kind of pull back in the second half and make a game of it. We'll dive into all that and what went wrong for A&M in the first half. But disappointing night in Oxford. A&M entered this game on a four-game winning streak. Appeared to have figured out some of their problems that they had early on in the SEC play, but they cropped up again tonight. Inability to run the ball. Zach Calzada making two costly mistakes in the second half. The defense kind of getting off to a slow start, and ultimately it was too much to overcome on the road, and this was a big test for A&M. It was their biggest road test to date. They had played obviously a couple neutral site games against Missouri and Arkansas, or against Colorado and Arkansas, and had the road game at Missouri, but nothing like the test they faced on Saturday night against Ole Miss. And just diving right into it, Ole Miss took control of this game early, outgained A&M 408-91 in the first half, and frankly, A&M was fortunate to only be down 15-0 at halftime. But Ole Miss squandered a couple opportunities in the red zone. In deep in A&M territory, had a fumble that gave it back to A&M, and A&M had a goal line stand as well on the 1 yard line that allowed them to really stay in it. But if things had gone a little differently in the first half, Ole Miss had a chance to really run away with this game early on, but they weren't able to put away the Aggies, and that gave them a chance to fight back into the game in the second half. A&M executed a little bit better in the second half, was able to get the running game going. Devon Aching was really a bright spot for A&M in this game. He had 12 carries for 110 yards and 2 touchdowns, but there's probably some cause for concern, honestly, on the A&M offensive side. A&M did not find the end zone until the third quarter of this one, and essentially went 2 games without scoring a touchdown. If you go back to the third quarter of the South Carolina game, even though they were able to get a win against Auburn, the offense obviously didn't really click in that one. And in the first half, they looked totally out of sync. And again, Ole Miss outgained them 408-91, and that really, in turn, kind of cost the A&M defense against that type of offense. I mean, at the speed that Ole Miss was running in the first half alone, they were able to control the game. They ran 58 plays in the first half to just 27 for A&M, had 23 first downs to just 5 for A&M. It was simply just a half dominated by Lane Kiffin and that offense, and had A&M scrambling all over the place. Jerrion Ely had a big first half with 13 carries for 122 yards. Matt Corral was 17 of 25 for 216 yards and a touchdown just in the first half. And so the A&M defense was able to kind of gain footing in the second half a little bit, and part of that was the fact that the A&M offense was able to get going a little bit and control the tempo a little bit. But if you still look at the stat line at the end of the game, Ole Miss outgains A&M 504-378, ran 93 plays. They just completely controlled the game, and that's a credit to what Lane Kiffin and that offense is able to do. A healthy Matt Corral, which he hadn't been in recent weeks. They're going to be, real dangerous and coming down the stretch now. They're in line now to potentially get to a New Year's Six bowl game. Just unbelievable the job that Lane Kiffin has done there at Ole Miss. Yeah, this is going to be a fun matchup to watch in the coming years, and it's a shame that didn't get a chance to play last year because of COVID and everything happened there. I thought that would have been kind of an interesting test for A&M and where they were. Ole Miss was kind of a team that I think was going to provide a little bit of a scary test, but yeah, it was a fun matchup, and honestly, it was just one of those true clashes of styles, and you saw that kind of play out over the course of the two halves. But as I mentioned earlier, this game brings back reminders of what happened earlier in the year when A&M struggled against Mississippi State and Arkansas. And it starts with the inability to get the running game going. Devon Aching had a huge night with 12 carries for 110 yards and 2 touchdowns. Thought down the stretch you could certainly make an argument that they should have just given it to him more, especially with the way A&M was struggling to make many passes through the air. Demond Demas did have a strong night with 5 catches for 43 yards, and Ananias Smith also with 5 catches for 77 yards. But honestly, it's one of those things when you have Zach Calzada, and we've talked about this at length throughout the year on this show. When you have a weapon like Devon Aching and the way he was rolling in the second half, and you still have a guy in Zach Calzada who's inexperienced from a playing perspective and has a tendency to struggle with accuracy and struggle with the big mistakes, I think you could certainly make the argument A&M should have kept going to Devon Aching and see what he could do. Zach Calzada, for him, it was a tough night. Yeah, he finishes with 237 yards passing. You could certainly argue there were some good moments for him at times, but the 2 turnovers are what's going to stick out from this game. And it was as poorly as A&M played, and we talked about this last week as well against Auburn. As poorly as A&M played, the reason they were able to be in this game at 15-13 was because of the turnover margin and avoiding turnovers. A&M could not afford to, with the hole they put themselves in early, could not afford to turn the ball over, and that's exactly what they did in the second half. And it went back to some similar things for Zach Calzada that we had seen against Arkansas and Mississippi State. Did not get his feet set in the pocket on the first one to Demond Demas. And you could make the argument that Demas should have caught it, but the truth is it was high and it was a 50-50 ball. So, he's just got to be able to set his feet on that throw and relax and stay poised in the pocket and deliver a ball to Demas that he can do something with. And then the second one, if you throw it late and inside, that's just a recipe for disaster. And up until that point, A&M still had a chance to come back. There was still plenty of time left in the game, but at that point, the game was pretty much over in that situation, just with the timeout situation and needing 2-point conversions on both plays. And so it was a tough night for Zach Calzada, and he'd been taking some strides and taking some steps forward, but tonight was a bit of a step back for him in terms of some of the costly mistakes that he made. Delivered some good balls, but ultimately this A&M offense just wasn't consistent enough. And it starts with the formula that has worked for Jimbo Fisher lately has been getting the ground game going, and they just couldn't do it against a defense that had frankly come in surrendering a lot of yards on the ground. But Isaiah Spiller, tough night for him, 15 carries for 41 yards. It's a 2.7 yards per carry average. And again, Devon Aching clearly had the hot hand tonight. Was surprised that they didn't try to get the running backs more involved in the passing game. But again, it was actually a decent night for guys like Smith and Weidemeyer and Demond Demas. And now, A&M has to start looking towards a bowl game. I agree. This would be an interesting matchup. Actually, I would love to see this type of matchup happen with Iowa. think that could be an interesting, again, kind of an old kind of slugfest. Would be an interesting one, and we'll see what A&M ends up kind of doing down the stretch here. Now their hopes of getting to an SEC championship game are probably out the window with this loss, and they've got to regroup, and they've got a big game left against LSU that is going to still have plenty of implications from a recruiting perspective. And during the final week of the year, come home and regroup against Prairie View A&M. But it's some of the same things that had kind of cost them, and we'll see going on the road again for a true road environment against LSU. It's a chance to bounce back. It's another chance for experience, especially for Zach Calzada, because I don't think he's really played in an environment like he did tonight. And that's taken into account last year and not having the chance to play in front of full crowds, and Kellen Mond being there. There were quite a few guys tonight that this was probably the toughest road environment they've played in. And A&M just looked totally out of sync. Did not look like the team they had been over the past past month or so since the Alabama game. And now you got to turn the page and focus on finishing the year strong. On the defensive side, give up over 500 yards total, 504 yards, and really from that perspective for A&M, it went back to some similar issues as well. Tackling was poor in the first half, and Ole Miss really gashed them on the ground. It was a big night for Jerrion Ely, who was fantastic, finished with 24 carries for 152 yards. A&M got out of their gap discipline and over pursued at times, and really struggled to deal with the quickness and the pace of this Ole Miss offense. And I thought that was really one of the storylines in the first half, was simply getting lined up. A&M struggled in that regard and kind of got punched in the mouth early. And it doesn't help when your offense is only given up or only able to get 91 yards total in the first half. That just kills you against a team like Ole Miss. So thought they struggled in that regard, and just weren't able to really, they surrendered a lot, but were able to also hold at the times they needed to. Goal line stand, like I mentioned earlier, was huge, and so they were coming up with some key plays to just be able to hold on to the rope a little bit. Deserve credit for that, and Ole Miss just really wasn't able to put the game away, and gave A&M a chance when frankly it could have been over quite a bit sooner. So again, taking your questions, let me know what you thought of this game, where A&M goes from here, where Ole Miss goes from here. They've got a couple games to close out the year. They've obviously got the Egg Bowl against Mississippi State, which I think is going to be just a fascinating game. Looking at Ole Miss's schedule, they've got a real chance as well with Vanderbilt next week. Ole Miss has got a real chance at a 10-win season in year two under Lane Kiffin, and that's a tremendous accomplishment. And they with the win tonight keep their hopes alive a little bit of getting to a New Year's Six bowl game. I mean, that's certainly a possibility. I think you have to look at that A&M LSU game. I still think that A&M that's going to be a really interesting game. I think A&M can still give LSU some problems, but they're going to have to play a lot better than they did tonight. And it's going to start with running the ball. Look, LSU's been playing a lot better the past couple of weeks. Obviously, went up to Alabama last week and almost got a win tonight. Arkansas ends up edging them 16-13, but this team has now 2 weeks in a row shown a lot of fight and haven't come out on the positive end of either of those games. But I think it's going to be an interesting game, and don't get me wrong, when you look at LSU, they'll get up for the game against A&M. You can be sure of that. I think they would love nothing more than to hand LSU to hand A&M a loss at the end of the year, and that's just a big game for both sides. And honestly, if you look at what A&M did tonight offensively, it's going to be the same sort of environment, and it's going to be one of those deals where you have to play better offensively, you have to get the running game going, and it could look a little bit like the game did last year, where it's kind of a low scoring, grinded out game. But I think A&M's got a lot to kind of look in the mirror since the bye week. Again, they've really struggled offensively. Went 2 quarters without an offensive touchdown. Granted, they were able to get the win against Auburn, but again, 2 quarters without 2 full games, but essentially without an offensive touchdown is real concerning if you're an A&M fan. And it's similar issues as we mentioned to the games earlier this year against Mississippi State and Arkansas. Just get off to a slow start, get on their heels, defense kind of be scrambling a little bit, and then kind of lock in towards the end of the second quarter and into the second half. As for South Carolina's chances, we got a question here on South Carolina and their chances of getting to a bowl game. I'm looking them up right now. It's going to be interesting. I still don't know, whether it'll end up being enough to get to a bowl game. This afternoon was tough when you consider that front, losing 31-28 to Missouri. They're now sitting at 5-5, with 2 home games left against Auburn and Clemson. If you look at what Clemson has looked like so far this year and how they've struggled, I think there's certainly a chance, but their opportunity to really cement that and punch their ticket to a bowl game was probably this weekend, because I think Auburn is still probably a better team, and even though they're coming off back-to-back losses, and we'll have to see how they respond next week. They're obviously kind of in a hole right now, and it's going to be up to how they respond. But it's an interesting question. I think Shane Beamer's he's done about as well as he could for his first year there. They battled some injuries, and especially at the quarterback position. So South Carolina is going to be interesting to watch over the next couple of years. And looking around the rest of college football, it's been an interesting day. It really has been. Oklahoma obviously loses to Baylor. Kansas beats Texas 57-56 in overtime. And boy, that's another, if you're a Texas fan and what's going on there, this one's going to hurt quite a bit. And now they're sitting at 4-6, needing 2 wins to get to a bowl game as well. No problem. Yeah, it's kind of an interesting situation with South Carolina. I mean, it's one of those things where in your first year, you're obviously looking to get to a bowl game however you can to get those extra practices. And so I certainly don't think it's out of the equation. They've been playing better and better as the year has gone along and steadily improving. And so, I don't see a reason they can't pull off a win in those last 2 games, especially in a rivalry game at home against Clemson. That could be a very interesting one to watch, and especially with the way Clemson struggled offensively. That could be an interesting game to kind of follow. And if you're A&M, I think there's still a lot to play for in terms of getting to 9-3 to finish out the year would be good, especially what they've had to replace, and losing Haynes King early in the year and losing some offensive linemen. Was talking about that with some people this weekend, that this is still a chance to take some strides and finish the year strong. This is going to be disappointing because I think if you're A&M, you felt like even as badly as you played, there were some missed opportunities tonight. There really were, and you're sitting at 15-13 on the road with a chance to go down and get a score. And as poorly as A&M played, and as how they were able to stick around in the first half despite just the pressure that it almost put on them, there was a chance to win this game. And if you're A&M, you're going to look back at some of the red zone struggles. They got a touchdown late with Devon Aching that kind of gave them a chance late, and they weren't able to get the 2-point conversion, but they had 2 trips down there in the red zone before that and came away with field goals on both occasions to begin the first half, and obviously had the one having to settle for a field goal again in the fourth quarter that would have given it changes the direction of the game, because A&M wouldn't have had to throw possibly with Zach Calzada, and maybe you're not looking at the interception with Damon Demas, but it's one of those things where with a quarterback like him, you gotta kind of deal with the growing pains. It's a good question on when you look at why A&M has struggled in the red zone. I think it starts with the quarterback position, and it starts with somewhat with the quarterback position. Actually, I think it's a bit of a it's kind of a 2-part answer. Things happen quite a bit. Things happen quicker in the red zone. You've got to be able to process plays and read coverages because everything's tighter. The windows are tighter in the red zone, and so there's certain plays where I think even looking at that 2-point conversion late. I know there were a couple of people that pointed out that Devon Aching was open kind of on the swing pass. And so it's just being able to notice those little things, those little windows, and to be able to play fast. And I think that's one of the things that's hurt A&M in this one. And then the other one is frankly penalties. A&M has really been hurt by penalties in the red zone. And you've just got to if you can get it down there and be able to run or pass, kind of changes the way things go. But A&M's really been hurt by penalties, which again, if you have a veteran quarterback with a lot of experience, you can maybe get away with those every once in a while. But A&M just truthfully hasn't been sharp enough down in the red zone and in those situations, and it comes down to execution. And then A&M just has not executed well enough in the red zone, and it cost them tonight. I know you can look at a variety of situations. You can look at the safety, which made it 15-0. That play ends up coming up huge late in the game when you look at the score, and A&M probably doesn't have to go for 2 at a certain point, and that play turned out to be huge. And again on that, you've got to you just I didn't love the play call coming out of the shotgun, but you've got to be able to execute, and you've got to be able to get out of your own end zone and avoid a mistake in that situation. I mean, that was just the worst mistake you could make, especially coming off. The Jimbo Fisher often talks about momentum plays, and A&M had just stopped Ole Miss 4 times down on the 1-yard line. You feel like you have some momentum in that game and a chance to go down, and you have a chance to go down and potentially get some momentum late in the second half, and just end up giving up a safety there. On the recruiting front, I don't think this loss is going to hurt too much on the recruiting front, to be honest. It's a good point, and it's natural to worry about it. Offensively, that might be the one concern when you look at if you're trying to make a pitch to some of the guys like an Evan Stewart and but again you're able to get. I think A&M was able to get the receivers involved a little bit with Anaya Smith with 5 catches for 77 yards, Jalen Weidemeyer with 5 for 68, and Damon Demas with 5 for 43. You flashed a little bit on the receiving end, but truthfully, this was an SEC game going on the road. And so it's not a terrible loss on that front. I mean, give Ole Miss credit. Ole Miss is a team that could be playing for a new 6 bowl berth in a couple weeks when they face Mississippi State. And so it's not the type of loss I don't think that's going to ding you from a recruiting perspective, especially given that A&M was coming off a 4-game winning streak. Now, I do think it is important, though, to finish strong. You mentioned Prairie View. It's important for A&M to bounce back next week against Prairie View and put on a good performance. And then it's important to finish the year strong against LSU, because you're looking at that game that's right about Thanksgiving. And, the early signing period is just a couple weeks after that. And so you want to be able to finish strong. But I don't think this loss will hurt from a recruiting perspective too much, especially, I mean, I know the defense gave up over 500 yards, but, there were plays where, when you look at what DeMarvin Leal was able to do and what Michael Clemens was able to do at times, I think the defense still showed some things. And, at a certain point, they had only given up 13 points at halftime, despite just the way Ole Miss had dominated that game, especially in the first half. To only give up 13 points and be down 15-0 with the safety was a credit to the way that defense fought. They really kept them in the game, because this really could have been so much worse. As crazy as that sounds, and with the way things were going and the way Ole Miss was rolling offensively, the A&M defense really came up with some stops throughout the game. And so I think if you're a defensive recruit and looking at what A&M did on that side of the ball, I think there's still some things you're really going to, look back on and like. I know it hurts in this moment, to fall short of the goal of playing for an SEC championship game, but A&M really, I think, from a recruiting standpoint, delivered on the weekends that they needed to deliver on. If you look at what they were able to do the weekends of Auburn and Alabama and even South Carolina when they came into town, A&M kind of did what they needed to do from that perspective. And it's still a year where A&M has a chance to. There's still plenty that A&M can accomplish. Can still finish 9-3 at a certain point when you're looking at this season and looking at how you evaluate it with some of the injuries that A&M dealt with up front and at the quarterback position. Sitting at 3-2, I think there's a lot of A&M fans that would certainly take 9-3. 10-2 would have obviously been ideal to win out. It would have given plenty of momentum, but I still think there's a lot to play for. I think it's just important that they now respond, especially that week against Ole Miss or against LSU, because when you look at some of the targets that A&M is going for and battling the likes of LSU, when you look at a guy like Harold Perkins, to be able to sell back-to-back wins over LSU would be huge for A&M on the recruiting front, as they try to counter a new coach coming in there. Prairie View next week, it's important not to have a letdown, especially coming off this game, to turn the page, go week to week, and then finish strong in the bowl. And A&M still has a chance to reach 10 wins this season, which is something that they can sell on the recruiting trail. So I don't think you'll see A&M kind of struggle on a recruiting front this week. And shout out to Kansas and what they were able to do tonight to come in, and that's a program that when you look at what they've done, especially playing down to the wire against Oklahoma, to go on the road and beat Texas. Texas has got a lot to figure out, to be honest with you, and what's been going on there the past couple of weeks. They're now in real danger of not making a bowl, and so that's really one that's going to sting, especially bringing in a big visitor weekend should ease the sting for A&M fans on the loss tonight. But A&M will look to kind of turn the page and get back on a good note against Prairie View, and they'll certainly be a lot to play for there. It'll be the last game in front of the home crowd for this year, so Kyle Field will be rocking for that one as well, and still want to finish out the year strong, and every week is an opportunity to play, and so we'll see. It kind of changes the goals and changes what A&M is kind of going for. No, it's not going to get you into a January 6th game, but there's still a chance to finish a year strong, and but if they being able to get to 10-2, you can still potentially get in. Like Ole Miss certainly kept their hopes alive of getting to a January 6th game, but I don't 9-3 can still get you to a solid bowl, and in a year that A&M had to replace a lot next week. I don't agree with that on nobody will be there next week. I think I think it'll still be a good crowd, and A&M will still have I think they'll still have a good turnout for that game. I mean, it's not the end of the world to be sitting at 8-3. There was certainly bigger goals for this year, and that's going to sting, and that's going to be disappointing. But I think in the long run, A&M will be fine. And it's a game to learn from, especially if you're Zach Calzada and you look at some of the mistakes you made. Again, can't throw late and can't throw inside, and he's just got to be able to read plays better and make reads quicker and get the ball out of his hands. And we'll see how A&M responds to finish the year. But again, to those of you who've joined, thanks for joining me as always throughout this year. And we'll see how A&M responds to close out the year. But again, thanks for joining, and have a great rest of your weekend. A&M falls 29-19 to Ole Miss, and we'll be back at home at Kyle Field for the last time this season at 11 a.m. next week, and then close out the regular season against LSU on November 27th. Have a great weekend, everyone.